pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see a full house. Before we begin, I would ask the board if they have any public comments. We have a couple of announcements before we start. The planning board wants everyone to know that they have a public survey that's concerning the updating of the master plan. It is being serviced by the site surveymonkey.com. There's paper forms of the survey at Town Hall, the Ritter Building, the library, and the Eagle House for those who don't have access to a computer or the web. And the actual URL, which will make no sense if I read it here, will be posted on the town's website. So again, Planning Board is looking for a citizen's input on their survey about the master plan. Also, next Wednesday, October 30th, at 7 p.m. at the Lunenburg High School Auditorium, they will have a public forum on the proposed Lunenburg Middle School High School. And that is to discuss, again, the project status update, a design update, and get public input about the project as it stands right now. I encourage everybody, it's obviously of huge concern to the town at large, and I encourage everybody to come and attend there. Again, Wednesday, October 30th, 7 p.m. at the Lunenburg High School Auditorium. Have any public discussion from the public? Please. But just wait till you get to that microphone. Sorry, for the people at home, and just say who you are, and then.
My name is Frank Hartnett. I'm the development director of the Catalano companies, the local Dunkin' Donuts franchisees. Our operations manager made a slight mistake and didn't apply for a common vic license in the proper amount of time. We've got approval from the Neshoba Board of Health. We've been talking to Carrie and Linda. And in fact, we've invited you guys to an open house there on Thursday. And we're looking for a little bit of leeway that we could be able to get the common vic and open up there. We've got all our approvals. I feel bad personally for this gentleman. He's new to the company and he dropped the ball. He made a mistake. So we're looking for a little bit of leeway from the board so we can be open on Thursday for this open house we're having and go forward.
We did receive notification of that today. I don't know what is in our authority to do, because we'd have to call. First of all, in order to call a meeting now, it would have to be an emergency meeting. I don't know personally that this qualifies from a town's point of view as an emergency meeting. So that's my first take. Second of all, licenses require us to review the license application. There are processes that we get back, and we would there is a specific amount of time that we'd like to have to review them and not be asked to make a hasty decision.
I know. I apologize. I believe we got the information in, and the query and all the other information was checked out today or yesterday.
I think we have some of it back, and I think there may be questions about some of it, if I'm not mistaken. Does anybody have any comment about it? I know everybody received the same notification from the town manager.
We'll comment. There was emails back and forth today trying to see if we couldn't establish a time for a meeting, so we could take this under discussion in public session in accordance with the open meeting laws, which requires a 48-hour posting of the meeting. And although there was energy behind getting the meeting together, there was still so much information still outstanding, it didn't make sense to try to do that as of this afternoon. So I don't know if that has changed, but we have looked at everything we can to move this along to accommodate you, because we want everyone to open up on time. We want that business to succeed.
I think it's a big thing for that area of the town.
It's a wonderful thing, but there's limitations within the open meeting law as to what we can do. So,
right, and that's the other thing. We couldn't take it up tonight, even if it was possible. with the notification, if you had even notified us yesterday because of the agenda being set. So then we're faced with 48-hour posting of a meeting, and if we posted it tonight, we wouldn't meet being able to do it on Thursday. It would be Friday, and town hall's closed on Friday. So I don't see, personally, I understand it was a mistake. I understand honest mistakes. I don't know that there's any way that we can accommodate that before the opening. And I do apologize, but I just procedurally and by state law, I don't know that we can do it.
So what would our next step be?
It would be on next week's agenda, on next Tuesday. Would that
A week from today?
A week from today.
So the open house that we've all planned for Thursday would probably have to be put off.
The common vic is for food, unless, I guess you could have an open house as an invitation to people to come see it, but yes, you wouldn't be able to serve any.
There's no way to grant like a temporary,
There is no temporary common vic license. Because it would have, anything that would be temporary would be following the same process.
okay. So can I ask you now to put us on the agenda for Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay?
Yep.
What information would you need Tuesday? You have all the information, correct?
Yeah, if you've, I'll defer to the town manager. I think you have the whole application in now, is that correct?
Yes, I do believe that we do, and if there are any questions, either I or Linda will be in touch with you.
Would you like this from the Board of Health?
No, I'm fine with that. He has received his food service permit from the Board of Health, so.
Okay, so there's no way around that then.
Not really, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the public? Okay, before we get into current business, we have a few proclamations. Well, one proclamation and one commendation. Let's start with the proclamation. We talked about this at our last 2 meetings ago, that the Lunenburg Women's Club was celebrating its 100-year anniversary here in town, and we had agreed that such an anniversary should be marked with a proclamation, and so I will read it. Before I read it, is there anybody from the Women's Club here representing them? Do you want to come to the front and just so I feel like I'm reading it not only to the audience, but to the club? You could just introduce yourself.
I'm Christine Latanzi, and I'm representing Catherine Dupy tonight. She's the president.
Okay, thank you. So the proclamation, whereas the Women's Club celebrates 100 historic years, and whereas life has changed since 1913 when the club was started to help the men at war, and whereas now they are proud to help upcoming young minds accomplish their dreams, and whereas 75% of every library was founded by women's clubs, and whereas the Women's Club will continue taking donations for veterans and 4 paws for ability for hunter spec, and non-perishable food items will be collected for the Lunenburg Food Bank, as well as box tops for education programs, and continue to award scholarships to Lunenburg High School students in addition to all of their worthy causes. And now, therefore, we, the Board of Selectmen, do celebrate the Women's Club 100 historic years and all they do for the community. Signed, well, about to be signed, all of us. While that's being signed, I want to thank you again on behalf of the board to all of your, through you, to your whole entire organization. Thank you for the work you do for 100 years. Not you personally for 100 years, but the organization for 100 years.
Well, we thank you for the recognition on behalf of all the members that work very hard in many areas to do good things for the community and for the young people, and for all the members past and present.
You can bring this to the club.
Thank you, Tom.
Next, we have both Police Chief Marino and Fire Chief Sullivan here to talk about an incident that the chief was here concerning a vehicle submerged in Lake Whalum on October 8th. So if I can invite both chiefs up. I understand that you would like to present commendations to both members of both of your departments, and I would
Indeed.
leave the floor to you.
All right, instead of reading a letter that I prepared for you, let me just set the stage as to what transpired that morning. It was approximately 9:30 in the morning. The police and fire had just, within a few minutes, had cleared a multi-car motor vehicle accident on Chase Road. This call came in, frantic call from the dispatcher saying that a vehicle just went through the fence down at the lakefront by the gazebo and into the water. The police and fire were dispatched immediately. Officer Zarate and Officer Devin O'Brien responded in car 205. They happened to be on Electric Ave at the time. They were a short distance away. Officer Deming responded in car 204. He was also a short distance away. Officer Zarate and Officer Devin O'Brien arrived first at the lakefront to find the car partially submerged, a vehicle. It was a late model GMC pickup truck. Actually, it was brand new. Officer Devin O'Brien immediately took off his gun belt and his boots and dived into the water. At that point, the car had already went under. At the same time, Officer Deming was coming around by the town beach, and he could actually see the car submerging from that point. Officer O'Brien went down with the car, made a couple attempts in the cold water to try to open the door, and at that point, Officer Deming arrived, and he too stripped off his gear, his gun belt, and his boots, and dove into the water with Officer O'Brien. Officer Zarate elected to stay on shore, as he should have, when Officer O'Brien went into the water to call in as the incident advanced, to notify everybody of its progression, to take care of the live ammunition and live weapons that were left behind, which were placed in the trunks of the cruisers and locked. Officer Zarate doing exactly what he should have done. At that point, Officer Deming is now in the water. The vehicle is totally submerged, the roof being about 4.5 feet under the surface of the water. Actually, as Officer Deming so poignantly stated that morning, that had that not happened, had they not been able to stand on the roof of the vehicle, the outcome of this situation might have been a lot worse because of the difficulty in cold water to be able to stay afloat. But at any rate, Officer Deming stayed there, went down several times with Officer O'Brien, both to take care of his fellow officer and to try to pull the gentleman from the passenger compartment of the vehicle. They were finally successful in opening the door. However, every time they went down, as the water was so cold, they had to return to the surface to catch their breath, stand on the roof of the car and catch their breath. At this point, Lieutenant Dillon from the fire department had got there, and again, this is all meteoric. It happened very quickly. Lieutenant Dillon was there immediately. He was with firefighter Glenny and Officer Licoditis, who also was an EMT and firefighter, who had just gotten off a police detail and responded to the scene of this accident. All three of them dove into the water to give Officer Deming and Officer O'Brien some assistance. At that point, Officer O'Brien was able to get the door open, and Lieutenant Dillon, Officer Licoditis, and firefighter Glenny made some attempts to get down to the vehicle as well. And you got to understand that this water was very dirty and murky, and it was very difficult to see under the surface of the water. Apparently, once the door was open, the gentleman must have, we surmised that he was able to get his seatbelt unbuckled, and he started to float to the surface of the water. At that point, was grabbing onto Officer Deming's foot and Officer O'Brien's foot. They made Lieutenant Dillon and firefighter Glenny aware of that, and they went down and actually pulled the guy up to the surface, where at that point, all of them were in the water and were able to hold him up and get him onto the roof of the vehicle. amazing feat of teamwork by, in a diversity of experience there and age groups. Officer Deming, 55 years old, just takes off his belt and dives into the water. Officer O'Brien, 21 years old. Rookie police officer with Officer Zarate, who is a field training officer who isn't even being paid at the time, just out there training, takes it upon himself to dive in the water. Amazing. Very commendable. All of them, very commendable act on their part. Cold water, they were freezing when they got out. We were concerned about hypothermia. They were able to get the gentleman into the boat, which was put in the water by an EMT, Daryl Demers, and another firefighter, Austin Flag. Were able to get the boat out there relatively quickly, get him loaded in a boat and bring him in. And Officer Zarate was talking to the gentleman a short while later at his hospital bed. He was fine. So with all of that, I can't speak highly enough about the teamwork, the response, the bravery. Certainly, they should be commended for those actions.
Again, definitely cannot overstate the challenges of dealing with that water. The water is probably, at this time of year, probably 50 to 55 degrees. Without protective equipment, that water will rob your strength in a very short period of time. As these gentlemen can attest, it tires you out very, very quickly. Combine that with, as the chief said, very poor visibility, not being able to see under the water, and just fighting that cold water. It is nothing short of a miracle that they were able to do what they were able to do in those conditions.
Would you like, if their office, yes, all the personnel involved are here, can we ask them to?
Regrettably, Officer Zarate could not make it tonight.
All the officers who are here, right, who you mentioned, if they could come forward so people can recognize them, that would be great. And if you could, each of the chiefs, if you could introduce your crew.
This is Officer Devin Z. O'Brien, Officer Peter W. Licoditis, and Officer Charles P. Deming, Jr.
Lieutenant Scott Dillon, Firefighter Michael Glennie. You might recognize that name.
Again, as I said the night when the chief talked about this, I think it was actually the night it happened, the day it happened. I can't say enough, as the story can attest to. I think you guys did an absolutely brilliant job, and I'm sure nobody knows that more than the gentleman you pulled out from that vehicle. So, again, I would congratulate you all on a job well done. I appreciate all the service, and I hope that a case like this doesn't come up anytime soon, but it's nice to know that if it does, that there are service personnel in Lunenburg such as yourselves and all of you. It's a good testament to the selection of the people we have on the force and the kind of training and commitment they have to the job. I don't know that you can ask any more of the people who serve on those departments, so thank you.
I just want to thank you for your heroic actions. But I also want to point out the teamwork, and I think that both chiefs emphasize that. I think we are very fortunate to have such a wonderful fire department and police department that truly are a team. And the people of Lunenburg, and we all appreciate everything that you do. And I've dealt with many of you for personal reasons and seen you in action. And the town of Lunenburg is really fortunate to have each and every one of you.
Just want to echo that. Of course, I've said it in the past. I mean, the public safety efforts in our town, the force in our town between fire and police, it's unsung heroes, and you guys tend to be ready for most anything. It's kind of amazing what you're able to react to and what you're able to do for this town. So, again, the day-to-day, I don't know if people always appreciate and understand what you do for us, but I do, and just thank you all.
I guess if I ever put my truck in the drink, I hope that Lunenburg's finest and Lunenburg's bravest are there to help me out. Thank you and congratulations, guys.
I just wanted to say that when I talk to people in town, everybody's proud of the fire and police department. And thank you.
Thank you all again, and be safe out there. I realized that I had two announcements I forgot to make earlier. One is for those who look for us to set the Halloween trick-or-treat hours. This year it will be Thursday on Halloween itself, October 31st, from 6 to 8 p.m. So that is the official trick-or-treat hours, 6 to 8 p.m. And last but certainly not least, in an effort to fill the vacancies we have on boards and committees across town government, I will announce from time to time different vacancies as other chairs have. And the one I want to focus on tonight is I want to issue that we are looking for people to fill 3 vacancies on PAC, the Public Access Cable Committee. We're looking for people who are interested in television and studio production, interested in organizing a department that handles that programming, that is able to make policies for how the public can access that programming and how assist in creating an environment where the public will want to create programming for broadcast on our stations. It really offers, in my estimation, a really unique opportunity for people who are, creative-minded as well as organizational-minded and want to take the Public Access Channel Committee to the next step. We've gone from a fledgling organization many years ago to now we have 2 channels since the latest license agreement with Comcast. We have lots of new equipment. They have a new studio at the Passio School. We're looking for people to fill those 3 vacancies to help make that committee a very productive committee and to make make programming as rich and as diverse as it can be. So if you are interested in serving on this committee, please either enter a talent bank form in person here at Town Hall. You can pick one up at the clerk's office or fill one out from the website online, download it, fill it out and return it, and put in your name. Again, 3 vacancies for the Public Access Cable Committee. Thank you. Okay, current business. We have approving the surrounding community agreement with the Cordish Company and Mass Live Casino Project. With that, we have our representative from Copeland and Page again to discuss this contract with us. And I will defer to him and town manager on this.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Jonathan Silverstein, Copeland and Page. When I was in front of you a couple weeks ago, we discussed the relatively tight time frame that the potential surrounding communities and the applicant are facing with the October 31st deadline for petitioning for surrounding community status to the Gaming Commission if we were unable to reach an agreement with the developer of the proposed slot facility in Leominster to give the town that status. So since that time, the town manager and I have been negotiating with the developer, and we have before you for your review and consideration a proposed surrounding community agreement with the developer. And if you'd like, I can walk you through the basics, the Reader's Digest version of the agreement, and just its main provisions. First and foremost, what it provides is what I believe we discussed at the last meeting was the board's primary goal, which was to attain surrounding community status, to get that designation from the developer, because of the hope that that will give the town a leg up down the road when the Community Mitigation Fund is begun to be administered by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. And just a short recap, that fund will be populated by both license fees and gaming taxes from the various gaming licensees as the Gaming Commission chooses those applicants, chooses those licensees, and as those facilities begin to operate. So in the short term, if Cordish in Leominster gets the gaming license for the so-called Category 2 gaming facility, the slots-only facility, they will have to immediately pay a $25 million license fee. That's the fee just to get in the door, and then from then on, they'll pay 49% of their gaming revenues to the state. So of that license fee, 10% or $2.5 million will go into this community mitigation fund. And that will be specifically set aside for communities that may feel impacts from the gaming facility. And so if you cast the net wide and say come up with a figure of 10 or 12 potential surrounding communities, might be a few more, might be a few less, probably not a few more, that $2.5 million could go pretty far when you divvy it up among the various surrounding communities. And again, that's just from the license fee. As the Category 1 facilities begin to open up, they will pay a 25% gaming tax per year on all of their gaming revenues, and of that, 6.5% will go into this community mitigation fund. There'll obviously be a lot more communities looking for those funds, but a lot more money coming into it, as well as 10% of each of their $85 million license fees. So there'll be a lot of money statewide to spread around from that community mitigation fund. And so it was important in speaking with the town manager and in my conversation with you that the town attain that status. And this agreement does give the town that status as a surrounding community. In addition to that, there are a number of other benefits that the town will receive. The developer felt very strongly and produced studies that the actual demonstrable upfront impacts to the various surrounding communities, other than perhaps Lancaster, whose town border actually borders the project site, would be minimal. In order to try to undercut that and really try to show that this project will have an actual demonstrable impact, the town would have had to have expended some significant funds to try to conduct its own impact studies and see if those impact studies showed something different. Again, from the developer's standpoint, what they say is this is going to be half that, and they have data from other facilities, similar facilities, to show that the traffic's going to be something around half the number of trips per day of a Walmart at off hours, and that the vast majority, they would argue, of those trips would be coming in from the state highways. So the actual impact fee that they were willing to agree to was just $5,000 per year. What they would term sort of nominal consideration for this agreement. It's $5,000, but it's obviously not going to make a big dent in your budget. In addition to that, what we were able to negotiate was, we said to them, look, you say that you're not going to have any impact on, for instance, the town's public safety services, but we're not comfortable just taking that at face value. And so the second benefit that we negotiated was that anytime the town is required to provide a mutual aid response to the facility, or if there is a public safety call, a traffic stop, an accident, what have you, in the town of of Lunenburg that requires the time or resources of your public safety entities, that the developer will pay the costs of that response. We'll have 60 days to come up with an itemization of what those costs are, equipment costs, personnel costs, whatever the case may be, and they will have to reimburse the town for those costs. So rather than trying to estimate what those costs, what those impacts might be, where the developer's saying they'll be non-existent, and we're saying, well, we think there might be something, the idea is, okay, well, they'll pay for whatever those actual costs are. In addition to that, the developer ultimately agreed after some negotiation to create a pool of funds that would be a percentage of their gaming revenues above a certain threshold, and that percentage will increase as certain thresholds are met, and that pool of funds will be divided equally among each surrounding community that voluntarily enters into this template agreement. So there's an example given that if 5 communities sign this agreement and they have $250 million in gaming revenues in a given year, that each community would receive a benefit of $37,500. Those are obviously numbers that were picked as an example. If more communities sign on, that payment could go down. If the gaming revenues go up, that payment would go up. But the idea is that if the facility does better, it's likely to have to involve more traffic, and so as their revenues go up, the payments to the town will also go up. They've also agreed to cooperate with the town. Going back to the Community Mitigation Fund, there are also a number of other funds. Just as an example, an issue that people raise frequently is problem gaming. When you're talking about expanded gaming in the state, people legitimately have concerns about problem gaming. I was at a meeting earlier today where the chairman of the Gaming Commission made the point that nationwide, the country currently spends about $55 million on problem gaming services. Once the gaming facilities in Massachusetts are up and running, there's going to be an annual a fund called the Public Health Fund set up under the statute, and annual expenditures in Massachusetts alone of $15 to $20 million on problem gaming. So again, there's going to be cooperation from the developer in seeking funds from the Community Mitigation Fund, if necessary from the Public Health Fund, from the Transportation Fund that's established, and a number of other funds, all that can have benefits to the town as a surrounding community. And so any information we need from them, any paperwork we need them to fill out, any other cooperation that we need from them, they're contractually obligated to provide. In addition, there are going to be job preferences for the communities that sign on to this agreement, for the construction jobs as well as the permanent jobs. Secondary to Leominster as the host community, but after Leominster there will be job preferences, and the figures vary, but it's not unlikely that there will be well in excess of $10 to $20 million in local vendor services required by this facility. So that could certainly be a boost to local businesses. There will be a kiosk in the facility. It's required to be placed in a prominent location within the facility to promote local and regional tourism and businesses. And so the developer has agreed to cooperate with the Neshoba Chamber of Commerce and the North Central Chamber of Commerce to get the word out to local businesses and venues that they have that access to that resource within the facility to hopefully bring some of the customers out to local businesses. There's a responsible gaming provision that's similar really to the provision in the host community agreement with Leominster that requires the applicant to exercise best practices with respect to problem gaming. And then there's another provision that I negotiated that I think was important. I think I mentioned the last time I was before the board that it's important for the applicant to be able to show the Gaming Commission that it has reached agreements with some or most or hopefully all of its potential surrounding communities. that's a benefit to their application. It's a benefit to the town, of course, to get the status and some of the other benefits that we're talking about. But what I did not want was for the town I represent to be put at a competitive disadvantage, or perhaps not to get the same benefits as another community, because it wanted to cooperate, because it wanted to move the process forward and didn't want to go to the costly and lengthy and adversarial process of going through an arbitration and an adversarial process before the Gaming Commission. And so what I said to the developers was, look, we're willing to work with you. The sense I get is that the town wants to have a cooperative relationship here, but if you end up giving some other community a lot more money because they held out, Lunenburg shouldn't suffer because it was more cooperative up front. And so what this provision says is that if the developer enters into a agreement with any other community that's more beneficial, other than Lancaster, again, for the reasons we cited, then whatever those benefits are in that other agreement with that other community, Lunenburg gets also. And so if Town X is able to get a $100,000 payment a year out of the developer, then Lunenburg gets that same $100,000 payment. I think it's unlikely, and I think that the trend I'm seeing across the state from being at a lot of Gaming Commission meetings and seeing the proposals from a lot of the other developers is that the Category 2 license applicants simply aren't willing to pay big mitigation fees up front because they really steadfastly maintain that they're not going to have substantial negative impact on their surrounding communities. But if that does happen, then the town has that protection. So those are the major provisions, the major benefits called for under this agreement, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board members have.
I will open it up to the board. Mrs. Bertram.
I just want to understand, you indicated that the developer has done studies that show that the traffic impact is negligible. That concerns me because I anticipate that we will have a lot of traffic coming from New Hampshire down Route 13 to this facility. While I understand that the majority of traffic will be on state highways, I think that Lunenburg will see an increase in traffic. And I'd like to understand that if we enter into this surrounding agreement and we agree to these initial payments that you talked about, the $5,000, and then the potential costs for public safety, police, and fire response. Does that negate our ability to negotiate additional revenue specifically for roads moving forward? You mentioned the Community Mitigation Fund, and that if we were to challenge the studies that the developer has put forth right now, that we would have to expend funds to prove them wrong, basically. So I'd like to understand more about the process of, if this license is awarded, what is the process to look at the studies that they have done, and at what point do we have an opportunity to challenge that information and then recoup those costs under the Community Mitigation Fund that's going to be established?
Sure. So I think that there are two separate, I want to break that out, if I might, into two separate
absolutely.
questions. The first question involves being able to challenge their studies, and I think seek a reopening of the agreement up front. And then the second is, what happens if we're experiencing impacts that they said we would not experience? What can we do then? So by entering into this agreement, the town would be giving up its ability to try to challenge these studies now and go through an adversarial process before the Gaming Commission to obtain the surrounding community status, because it would not now be part of a negotiated designation, if you will. So maybe what I should do is lay out the process. The process would be, by October 31st, we would have to petition the Gaming Commission for the Gaming Commission to designate Lunenburg as a surrounding community. If the Gaming Commission agreed that Lunenburg was a surrounding community, i.e. that it was going to have substantial negative impacts, and we were able to demonstrate that to them through our petition on the 31st and through the subsequent proceedings that they may hold, then they would say to the parties, okay, you have 30 days to negotiate a different agreement. Now, it might be that the developer comes up with more money, or it might be that they continue to say, look, we were already willing to give you surrounding community status, but we still don't think that the impacts you're going to experience will be not adequately taken care of by what we'd already agreed to. So that's our last and best offer. The process would be that you then go to an arbitration. And what the arbitrator will do is solicit the last and best offers from each side and has to pick one of them. So if Town X says we want $1 million a year and the developer says we'll give you $1 a year, the arbitrator doesn't get to say, wait a minute, I think it's really 50,000 or 100,000. That's the reasonable number. The arbitrator is required to pick one proposal or the other. And so that would be the process. It would probably bring us sometime into February or March. And during the course of that, it would be important for us to be gathering the data and the support we need to show that the impacts we're worried about are not just speculative, that they're backed up by some sort of empirical data or studies. So that would be the process to challenge their assertions now. Let's fast forward to, I think, the crux of the latter part of your question, which is, okay, let's say we sign this agreement, they get the license, they open up, and a year from now we say, wow, we really are experiencing the traffic we were worried about. We think we need a new stoplight. Think we need to widen a road. We think we need, to change the timing of some signals. Whatever the case may be, we need money. We will not have the chance, under this agreement, we would not have the chance to go to the developer and say, we want you to pay us something more than what we've already agreed to. What we would have the opportunity to do is go to the Gaming Commission and say, you've got $2.5 million sitting in a fund to specifically earmarked in the legislation to mitigate impacts felt by surrounding communities. And so we're asking you for $450,000 of that money for a new traffic signal at the intersection of X and Y streets, or whatever the case may be. That's where your remedy would be, and that's what those funds were set up for. And the legislation specifically says, look, we understand that it's going to be difficult to anticipate what the impacts are going to be, and that the mitigation agreements that we establish might not cover all the bases. And so that's why we're setting up this fund. And that's specifically what that fund is meant for. So being designated a surrounding community, being able to show impacts, in fact, post-opening, is going to put you in a very good position, I would say, to petition for those funds. And the applicant would be required under this agreement to cooperate. But, just to be clear, you give something to get something. They're saying, we'll give you the designation even though we're not sure we agree you'll be negatively impacted. We'll give you the designation, we'll give you these payments, we'll agree to these reimbursement provisions for public safety response, and we'll cooperate with you in seeking funding, but we're not going to do all that and then have you come back, and keep coming back to us and saying, well, what about this, what about that? That was sort of the trade-off in reaching this proposed agreement. And again, everyone on both sides of the table, everyone knows it's a proposed agreement. It's for your consideration and approval. I think in talking to the town manager, and who's had some conversations as well with the developer, I'm quite certain we won't be able to negotiate a better agreement. The alternative would be to go through the petition and arbitration process before the Gaming Commission.
So the remedy, what do you say, $2.5 million is in this fund?
$2.5 million up front. So again,
And that covers the whole state,
Nope. So, and I don't mean to cut you off, but so the way it's going to work is the Category 2 facility, say if it's Leominster, will open up first. They're smaller, It's, 100,000 square feet compared to over 1 million square feet for the Category 1s. They're getting licensed first. By design, this facility is meant to get up and running within 1.5 to 2 years at the outside. The Category 1 facilities quite likely won't be open for several years. So up front, the 10% of that license fee, the $25 million license fee, so $2.5 million, I think it would be very difficult for a surrounding community to a Category 1 facility that hasn't opened to petition for those funds and to, be given funds over Lunenburg, where the Category 2 facility, which provided those funds, is already up and running. So that's sort of the early funding is going to be $2.5 million. That's going to be the first money that goes in there. Going forward, once the Category 1 facilities open, 10% of their gaming tax is going in there. So if you pick a round number, say the Western Mass facility opens up and it does $400 million in gaming revenue, and I think that's quite low. The estimates are much higher than that, but you pick $400 million, so I don't have to do hard math. 25% tax on that is $100 million. 6.5% of that tax goes in the community mitigation fund. So $6.5 million on an annual basis from that facility will go in the community mitigation fund. You can pretty much double that for the Boston facility when that opens. So you're going to be looking probably in the range of $20 million annually going into the community mitigation fund, as well as the 10% of those license fees, so another $8.5 million from each of those Category 1 facilities. Obviously, the pool of applicants is going to dramatically increase, but so will the pool of money once those Category 1 facilities come online.
Yeah. We're just always cautious whenever we talk about state funds being available to us, because they almost never are. I mean, it always sounds great on paper up front, but...
Here's what I will say about that, and trust me, I've been having that argument with applicants on behalf of host communities and surrounding communities. I'm very cognizant of that. Little thing called the Quinn Bill comes to mind, 40R. I mean, there's no shortage of commitments from the state that have been reneged on. Here's the thing. This is not a formula developed by the governor or by a state agency. This is in the legislation that took many, many years to pass, to build coalitions to get it passed. The funds are not administered by an administrative agency that's dependent on funding from the legislature. It's going to be administered by the Gaming Commission, which is funding from the gaming receipts. It was very methodically set up to be independent of political pressures and to put a firewall up around those funds so that they go to the intended source. Is it impossible that the legislature finds a way to raid those funds? No. It would be much, much more difficult than some of the other commitments that they've backed out on in the past to municipalities. Now, if you go through the legislation, there's vast amounts of other gaming tax revenue that I haven't talked about. That's 6.5% that I've talked about. But there's the Transportation Infrastructure Fund, and there's the Community Local Aid Fund. There are a lot of these funds that are specifically designated, again, in the statute, not in a formula, to be added to payments to municipalities. So hopefully what we've talked about is not all that's there. It might be easier to imagine a situation where some of those funds, and the legislation, it anticipates the criticism and the skepticism. The legislation says that the funds being added to the Community Local Aid Fund, it specifically says this is not an offset. This is in addition to everything else that's supposed to go in there. Might they rob Peter to pay Paul in some creative accounting mechanism? They might do that with those funds. I don't know. I think probably not for a while, because there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of they're under a microscope right now. Down the road, that might happen, but I think at least these community mitigation funds, and I'm as skeptical as the rest of them, I think those funds in particular are going to be available for the intended purpose because of the way it's been set up.
The way it is set up, if I may ask, it's not, because of the way it's set up by statute, it's not really subject, the seeding and the continuing money as these operations come up on online are not subject to appropriation, right? They are, that is where the money automatically goes to. So in that regard, it is similar to the Community Preservation Act. Would you agree with that? That the money goes right to that?
That's
and then
right.
it gets dispersed from that fund?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so the receipts to that fund might go down over time when you have a real estate bust. And, you've probably seen that if you have CPA. But the fund itself is segregated, it's set up by legislation, and it would take an amendment to the legislation to change that.
So your considered legal opinion and negotiator advice is that Section 7, Article 11, the no reopening of the agreement, there's no opportunity to change the wording on that to allow for maybe a year out after they're in operation to review?
Trust me, I tried. They were very adamant on that. They gave one alternative that and we went back and forth on this quite a bit, and I think I didn't want to inundate the town manager with too many emails, but I copied her on some of the back and forth on that. The alternative they gave was that, fine, if you want to be able to reopen, if you think that you can establish substantial net negative impacts, meaning negative impacts that haven't been addressed through the benefits in this agreement, then we want to be able to do the opposite. If we're paying you, if we do $250 million in gaming revenues and we pay you that additional $37,500, and we can prove that you haven't had any demonstrable negative impact, then we want to be able to take that payment away. Essentially what they were saying is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you want to be able to open up, if you think you can show more impacts, we want to be able to open up to, if we think we can show less impacts, because we're that confident, they said, that you're not going to have those impacts. That you might have some more trips along your roads, but it's not going to translate into increased service costs, increased maintenance costs, and the like. So that was the alternative that they proposed, and personally, from my standpoint, I don't think that would be a more beneficial alternative. But if it's something that you all wanted me to explore with them, I'd be willing, obviously, more than happy to do that. But they were quite clear that this was their last and best, and we went around quite a few times on this and other issues.
They're very confident that we won't be able to demonstrate negative impacts. I remain concerned with the roadway traffic, and my question would be, and I think it would be more appropriately to the town manager, and I don't know whether we've had the opportunity to take a look at these studies. I know MRPC has been involved with this project at some level. One of the main concerns that I have, we had the highway superintendent, the DPW director here, who mentioned this concern and also mentioned the need that any revenues that we receive through a surrounding agreement should be put towards our roads, because the specific concern is our roadways. We're not able to handle the local traffic we have now, never mind increased traffic from a gaming facility. So if we do see that traffic coming from New Hampshire, I understand that their professionals have said we're not going to see it, but my question would be, what have we done to look at that data? Do we have information or feedback from the planning board as to any concerns that they have, or any information from MRPC as to their look at the data and whether or not they concur with the fact that there will be negligible impacts to Lunenburg?
MRPC was required to review the application, which they did at the end of August, and that's pretty much when this came to our attention. They reviewed the traffic analysis and the report of the peer review engineer. They were required, or they identified several different intersections or roadways that were of concern that they felt needed further study. They prioritized those into two different categories, an A and a B. And Route 13 was the last on the second category. So that was of concern to them. Because of that, and because of the short timetable that we have, I asked World Tech Engineering, who has done some traffic work for us most recently, and they were available, and also are the traffic engineer representing one of the cities for one of the category ones. I can't remember if it's Everett. Okay, so they're representing Everett. So they're familiar with the process. I asked them to look at both of those reports and let me know if they thought the assumptions that were made, particularly in the traffic report, seemed reasonable, or if anything stuck out. So they did look at that report, and they wrote a letter up, which you had maybe last week or the week before. And they, based on what they saw, but they didn't have access to the appendices at the time, they thought the assumptions seemed reasonable. So because we have such a short timetable, it seemed to make more sense to focus on what to do if we had impacts once the project is up and running, rather than trying to create data at this point, given the time constraints that we had. MRPC going forward, the executive director has committed to reviewing the traffic data on a quarterly basis and reporting back to the surrounding communities that are in the MRPC region. I talked to him as late as last Friday and asked about the possibility of them doing some additional traffic counts for us, specifically on the routes to this project. We get 5 traffic studies a year for free, and I asked him, I didn't necessarily want to use those up on this, and MRPC did agree to work with all of the communities and identify which ones that they were going to monitor on a more regular basis, and that wouldn't count against us for our other traffic counts.
Mr. Toll.
Clarifying question, in the last of the proposed agreement, you talked about us getting, my words, most favored nation kind of treatment. Let me just make sure I understand that. If another community chooses not to negotiate as part of this voluntary surrounding community agreement and goes the adversarial arbitration route and wins at arbitration, do we automatically match what they get?
No, so the idea was that if the developer voluntarily provides or negotiates something in excess of what the town is getting, the town will get that match. But again, I did try, but they weren't willing to, because who knows, I mean, everyone's had experience with arbitrators, who knows where that can go. And they weren't willing to do that, knowing that there are a number of potential surrounding communities that they were negotiating with and that would all have, that similar matching program. However, I mentioned that the process is each side gives its last and best offer. And so it's designed that way specifically to give each side in an arbitration a really strong incentive to sharpen their pencils and give the best offer they're willing to give. And so you would assume that if another community takes the developer to arbitration and they get to that, that last point right before someone has to jump off the road in the game of chicken, that the developer is going to propose something more than what it's been proposing all along, because it's going to want to look like the most reasonable person. And what I was able to get in the agreement is that last and best offer, they'll have to match.
Whether it's accepted or not?
Whether it's accepted or not.
Okay.
Because if it's accepted, then that's what the other community gets. If it's not accepted, the other community is getting more. You wouldn't get the more, but you would get the offer that went into it.
Okay, thank you.
Has any other community signed an agreement with Cordish to?
Westminster signed the equivalent of this last night.
Okay.
And Lancaster has reached an agreement. In principle, I'm not aware whether or not it's fully signed, but again, I will say that agreement is somewhat more beneficial to Lancaster, again, because they border the project site.
I mean, in my opinion, my analysis of this, I think from what you said in your last trip before the Board of Selectmen a couple of weeks ago when you introduced this to us, getting that status seems to me, and getting access to the pool of money seems to me a better avenue than going the other route where we're going to be in arbitration, because clearly from your negotiations, they're not willing to really go much further. And if they are, it's going to be negligible. Even if they went up to $7,500, when they haven't gained anything from that, even if they would attempt to go for it. But also, once we have that status, it's a lot easier to prove existing traffic patterns than it is proposed traffic patterns, which is all you're doing is pitting experts against each other in what they think is going to happen, which is more of a guessing game than anything for a facility that we have nothing of its like in this area, except for Connecticut, in this region. So I'm more than comfortable with this. I commend the job you've done in getting the provisions with the profit sharing above those thresholds that you did, and the clause, what is it called, the more beneficial agreements clause. So I am perfectly fine with going forward with this tonight.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
Excuse me. Three things. The other clause in there was reimbursement for negotiating costs. So therefore, the cost to hire our town's attorney is included, and that the developer will be paying for that.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. Thank you.
Well, I figure I would, since it's your money. Secondly, going back to the disbursement process about application for the Community Mitigation Fund, what was discussed earlier is that the Gaming Commission has not adopted regulations for how you would apply. So that will still be, that's sort of when we talk about whether the state will give the money, they can favor or not favor somebody else. I don't think they're probably going to do that, because I think they're going to have pressure from everybody to make everybody happy. So therefore, I think it will probably be fair, because politically it would not make sense to have regulations that wouldn't work that way. I would echo Carrie's comments about the study. I think it's important that we perhaps even use some of the money, or in advance use some of the money that will come in to benchmark all the different intersection coming from Townsend going down Route 13, Townsend 13 to Highland Street, Main Street, down Lancaster Ave and Leominster Road. I know that was talked about within World Tech's discussion, but I think our DPW director also said it's important to benchmark now. Mm-hmm. That will certainly change if there's a development along the way, that we would have to take that into account too. I think that this is as good a contract as I think we will get from this developer. The other thing I will point out, this is not Foxwoods. This is not Mohegan Sun. It is a slot spoiler. Even though they've bought property adjoining to their property and have doubled the size that they could possibly expand in the future, it's not this huge complex that would be somewhere else, and that would be looking at the Category 1. So I'm comfortable with where we are now, with the understanding that we can go against the mitigation fund for documented changes.
Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Bertram.
I would just echo Mr. Ebersol's comments. It was what I was going to suggest. It's going to be, I was glad to hear the town manager make mention of the fact that MRPC is willing to work with the communities to look at increasing traffic counts. But in addition to down the road, it's going to be important that we can document our existing traffic patterns so that we can show that increase. And I would echo that it's going to be very important that we earmark, with $5,000, it's not going to go very far, but it's going to be very important that we utilize those funds to show if in fact there are impacts. But we're going to have to document our existing traffic patterns and then take a look once this facility opens. I personally, while I agree that gaining surrounding community status is important, and I think it does give us access to mitigation funds moving forward, I'm disappointed in the small amount. At $1 million a mile to pave, obviously $5,000 doesn't go very far. we're constantly struggling with our roadways, and I think it's going to be extremely important that we can document and do the homework ahead of time so that we can gain access to those mitigation fees. While I will vote to enter into this agreement tonight, it is with a strong caution that we utilize these funds and that we do the homework now, and that both the planning board and the DPW director be engaged early in the process, meaning, within this month, to start documenting information, pulling together what we have. The intersection of Route 2A and 13 is already a high crash site, and that's documented by MRPC. It's going to be important that we look at that data as this progresses.
I would just add, I think public safety is going to be more of an issue than DPW, but either way, baselines are important. With that said, I would make a motion that we approve the agreement.
We have a second.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Silverstein. Next up, approve criteria 3, energy reduction plan of the Green Communities Task Force. I see we have members of the Green Communities Task Force in attendance.
Always helps.
You're gonna end up probably doing a lot of the discussion and things.
Good evening.
Good evening. How you folks doing today?
Doing great.
All right. I know you just recently received a lot of data and a lot of information from us. The Green Community Task Force has been working diligently to our October 31st deadline for filing. One of the criteria for filing was to put for criteria 3 was the energy reduction plan, and to gain approval for yourselves and the school committee for this plan as we move forward. I'm basically up here to kind of walk through it with, not as much walk through it, but more to answer questions if you haven't. We could do either one. We could either walk through it with you or whatever you guys want more than anything else, since we're your board. Your task force.
Well, since we just received this yesterday, I would like you to at least, in a broad sense, review what you've submitted. So since I can't speak for everybody, but I haven't had a chance to, really go through this with a fine-tooth comb as I wish I could.
Okay. All right. If you like, I could put up for a little bit larger print, or for folks at home, I can throw it up. It's up to you guys on how you want me to do it.
I think it would be good to have the presentation if you'd go through it quickly. I was able to read it, and I think there's a lot of valuable information, but if you pick one or two buildings to look at for what you're doing, that would give an example of what you did for all the other buildings.
Okay. All right. So first thing is there was a Word document that's titled Energy Reduction Action Plan, Town of Lunenburg. This is just a general outline of what we're looking at and a general idea of what the buildings are, what we categorize them at, and what we're looking at as a baseline for it. We're using this present fiscal year, that FY13. I think we're still in FY13, as our baseline year. 14. Oh, so we're using FY13 as our baseline year. With this data was accumulated through a software program that the state provided, working with some of the utilities. John has done a great job of putting things together for this and looking at the data, working with the different departments and getting it together. So if I go on page 2 of the document, and there's a summary of the municipal energy baseline on that page for baseline 2013. And kind of outlines a little bit about what we're looking at is the MMBTUs is what this is million BTUs as that the different buildings are using. As you can see, it's the buildings that use most of the energy on it, followed by the vehicles, the water, sewer, pumping stations, and then open space and traffic lights comprise the small amount of that. To your right, you'll see projected planned MBTU savings, and as you can see, a lot of the savings we're trying to get out of the buildings. Mostly, the vehicle is done through an anti-idling policy that would be adopted. That 10% is done by a federal standard. a federal standard that says if you enter into this anti-idling policy, you can assume that you'll have a 10% savings in your fuel. And then the water sewer pumping station is once again a percentage of the total that we look for.
That column, the projected
Yeah,
planned
it's all
savings on
blank.
ours is blank, by the way.
Yeah, there's no information.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me to fill?
It was on the online version, so, or the distributed.
Same thing I emailed you.
Right, it is.
Yeah.
So we go with that version.
I was hoping that was going to be a lot bigger than that.
It's getting brighter.
Getting brighter at least.
It's using less energy.
Wow, we're saving already.
Just fill in the blanks or something like that as we go through. Okay. All right. Wait a minute.
So it's on this copy that was handed out. Are you talking about the annual projected electricity savings?
Yeah, in the
That's on
Word
one-
document that's in the packet is what we were referring to.
That was
blank.
handed out tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, table 2.
It's
Page 2.
Town Hall, Library.
Oh, buildings.
So there was just a quick
Okay.
table in the
All right,
beginning.
if you actually go to the actual data of each building, the savings is there.
So I can actually, yeah, we can go through that, but this is kind of giving you a quick outline of what we're looking at here. And that's, you can see here that the most predominant place we're looking to save is in the buildings. A lot of this is in electricity, is where we see the greatest ability to save. And that 10% that you're seeing for the vehicles is based on a figure that the federal government gives us for an anti-idling policy.
Can you just read those?
Sure. For the projected plan savings for the buildings, I have 3,614.3. For the vehicles, I have 447.8. For street and traffic lights, I have 0. For water, sewer, and pumping, I have 67. And for open spaces, 0, with a grand total for 4,129.1.
And then just run down the percentages, the last column.
16.28, 10.04, 0, 15.37, 0. And that 20% should actually be 15.16.
Thank you.
Wasn't the goal 20?
The goal is 20. You're supposed to be able to show 15%, and then the other 5% you'll be working towards
Okay, all right.
as we go along.
The remaining is discussed in a narrative of other possible projects we might undertake.
Okay.
As an example for that would be converting the public safety over to natural gas from oil, is an example of that. And that's discussed in, a little further down, is it? Yeah. That's discussed in the narrative, which is on page 3. And you'll see for overall overview of where it says, getting to the 20%, right?
There's an overview of goals 4 through 5.
4 through 5, right. Where are you now? Right in,
Narrative section.
right,
Section 8.
section 8, and it's going to be right in here?
Yes.
Okay, right. So this is where we talk more about getting to the 20%. So if you look at section B of the narrative, getting to the 20%, and then the 5% is done by just other plans, other things that would be added to the energy conservation plans, and other things that would be added. So what the state has asked us to do is come up with at least 15% outlined in individual projects with dollar figures on those projects, and then the last 5% would be done as other things we can do as we move forward and do other with the grant money.
I always had I've had the question on previous presentations by your committee. So they give us whatever grant money we get given, and then in 5 years from now, we don't hit 15%. We manage to get to 12%. So what does the state do? Do they say, thanks, can you give us all our money back?
Actually, there's no mention of what they would do if you don't. It said they ask you to try to hit the goal of 20% savings. Now, this is also the first round of grant savings. Folks who have applied for Green Community and have been Green Community for several years now are already on their second round of grants. So you can actually keep applying for grants each year after that initial grant, just by showing the projects that you've accomplished and the projects you would like. It's a new round of grant save each time you go.
Okay.
So we can keep going for grants and keep looking for money to try to really make whatever we need to get done. I mean, I would look to, as we say, the idea of the public safety buildings going to natural gas. You bet you're going to be looking for another grant for that. I don't think we're going to town meeting to ask them to come up with the money for that just yet.
Okay.
So I'd like to quickly, if I could, this is basically a lot of verbiage and things like that about the MMBTUs. If I can skip to the Excel spreadsheets, and the first one I can talk about is the baseline spreadsheet. And this didn't come out right because I'm going to skip over a little bit. It breaks it up into the electrical, the gas, and other things that we use. I'm going to go right over just so it's easier to see. If you look at the total MMBTUs here, you can see that it's the high school elementary complex that uses the most amount of energy in town, followed by the middle school, then the public safety building, and then the primary school on it, with the library coming in after that. So really, the two places that we would like to concentrate is on the high school elementary school, a lot of it in the other schools that we do, as well as the public safety building, where we really feel we can have the greatest impact on things. The other large area that you don't really think about it too much, but the other large area is going to be just in gas for our the DPW. That's the gases for everything, or is the gas usage was police, fire, and DPW?
Yeah, that's collective.
That's collective for everything is the gas usage. But once again, the anti-idling policy is what we feel like would help us with that.
And just so I'm clear, what you're asking this board to do is approve this so you can submit it, and that would be the final criteria that we would be submitting?
That's correct. We've already have approval from whether it's yourselves, town council, on the other four, and it's just this is the final criteria.
So if this gets approved, then we would attain green community status?
We would be able to apply for green community status for the October 31st deadline and look to get be granted status by December.
So with Mr. Londa here, I would just ask him, so these savings that you're projecting for over 5 years, in your estimation, you've done more work than anybody on this kind of analysis, especially the buildings, because the schools are under your charge. Is this achievable?
You know, this is there's one thing on here that is just overwhelming for whether this plan is successful or not. The biggest energy user, or biggest energy savings that is in this plan is replacement of the high school. There's more energy savings tied up with the heating of the high school than anything else in this plan. And so it makes this plan much more doable than most plans I've seen, because we're not looking for 20% is a big number for energy savings. However, heating of buildings is where all the savings come in. The lighting is great and wonderful, but it's not the big savings, it's the heating. And so buildings that are inefficient, such as Lunenburg Town Hall and Lunenburg High School, that's where all the savings are. And so if the high school project goes forward and is successful, we're seeing almost all of the energy savings coming in out of the heating of that building. Now, there are some offsets that come with new buildings. There will be higher electricity usage, and electricity is a premium fuel, which costs obviously more than natural gas does. So this plan actually shows, the high school in there, and we say all the benefits in there from the heating reductions that we would see, but we also see a pretty substantial plus up for electricity usage.
So this plan is predicated, the way it's written, not saying it couldn't be rewritten, but the way it's written right now, it's predicated on a new middle school, high school project.
That's correct.
Okay.
And which makes this, if that goes, makes this a very doable plan, because you're not looking for 20% from every building. We have obviously some newer building stock with the public safety building, the public library, and the primary school. Getting 20% out of those buildings would be difficult. Obviously, we have older buildings. Those are the places where the other major energy savings are to be found. And the only other thing that I would say about this plan is there are two aspects of it that I think are wise things to do. One of them is it requires that we develop energy conservation plans that are building specific, that brings the town department heads in to actually planning how they use energy in their buildings. And so that forces them to look at their occupation schedule of their building and how their mechanicals, whether it be the heating ventilation system come on, whether the outside lighting, when it comes on, when it goes off. It gets them into thinking about things like set points. What temperature do we want the building to be at 2 o'clock in the morning? So those kinds of policies, very powerful. Also, in the case of lighting, most buildings are built so the lighting provides you enough to be able to operate when there's no daylight available. Most of our municipal buildings don't operate in that condition. A lot of them are operating during the day with lots of natural light coming in. Those buildings need to have a good plan for what lights are on during the day, and when they go into those evening hours, if it's a public library, when they get to a higher level of lighting, they need to be able to operate at nighttime. So those kind of plans, very smart thing to do, very low cost, but will yield 4-5% savings on their electricity bills. And then the second thing I would say is that this plan looks at is we have a new emerging technology in LED lighting. That's something we need to be actively pursuing because it's substantial reductions. It's on the electricity side, so it's not the same as on the fuel, on heating where it really impacts it. But the lighting, it's a new technology. It's coming out. It's being adopted, and it does present some substantial reductions in lighting costs. So this plan is predicated upon having middle school, high school go through. If it does not go through, we have 5 years to achieve this 20%. We would obviously have to do a major rewrite on this plan if it's not going to go.
Okay.
So just to say, basically what the state is asking us is we have a baseline. We're supposed to review that baseline, review where we've been each year. So if we're looking at it and we're only receiving 2% savings over a year, we know we have to rewrite the plan for that. So they're asking you to each year to rewrite your plan, relook at your plan, and to base it on that, on what that. And like I say, a lot of this is coming out of the grant money or other funds that we have. We're trying to do this where we have little to no impact on basically the running capital on the town today. So just to emphasize a little bit on what Mr. Londa was mentioning there with the energy savings, if I look at, say, I'm going now to the other table, the really small Excel tables on actually the plan. And if I have a look at an energy conservation, just an energy conservation policy was showing that we're going to have a 2,000 kilowatt hour savings in electricity and 169 in heat. And going back to what Town Hall is showing, is that's basically close to 10% of the actual usage. So it is substantial, the amount of savings you can have with just an energy policy. So that's why we feel this is very achievable, very doable plan, and actually the cost we're looking at for some of these things is the cost today. So LED lighting today might be expensive. As we implement it, we think the cost is going to come down, so the impact will be even less to us and be able to do more things.
Open it up to the board. Anybody have any questions?
In reading the plan, it makes reference specifically to vehicular changes, and I do see, obviously the 10% savings within the vehicle line item and the showing, but I'm not seeing anywhere in the plan where you talk about the measures to implement that savings, and maybe I'm just missing it. I haven't had a chance to read this thoroughly, but...
Understand. So if I go onto the Excel spreadsheet and I go into line 40 of the Excel spreadsheet here, and boy, oh boy, that doesn't help us too much.
I don't think she's talking about the numbers. I think she's talking about the narrative.
Right. I don't see anywhere within the narrative where you talk about what measures are being taken from a vehicular standpoint. When you talk about the goals, you've got specific outlines for years and what those objectives are, but I don't see anywhere in there where you talk about what changes are being implemented from a vehicular standpoint. So I think that may need to be added.
Yeah, we probably can reference that. As part of the energy efficient vehicle policy that you adopted, there was an anti-idling policy in there. That's something that has to get disseminated, it needs to get all the way down to the every driver.
Right. I think that's something that needs to be incorporated, because specifically on page 4 and number 3, and I'm a little bit confused about number 3 on page 4, because it looks to me like that's more directions than outlining what's. It talks about table 4.2, lists completed and planned energy conservation measures, including vehicular efficiency measures.
I think that's a separate plan that we adopted about 2 weeks ago.
We need to incorporate that.
Okay, and that's all. That is all incorporated and brought in under the whole entity. It's basically, if you look at, I can't really show it too well here, but if you look under the where am I here? And under page lines 42 and 43, under the vehicles, highway, school department, anti-idling in diesel vehicles, anti-idling in. So it is mentioned there as how we're going to achieve that 10%. And like we say, that's federal standards that allow us to say 10%.
So on the vehicular side, there's 2 strategies: the anti-idling for the different departments, and then the fuel-efficient vehicles.
Right. So what right. But only the fuel-efficient vehicles is only for non-exempt vehicles.
Right.
And as we determined, there's only four at most in town. So we didn't feel like the savings for going for fuel-efficient vehicles would be significant, but the savings for anti-idling, as in a truck can't sit and idle outside the DPW for more than 10 minutes while somebody's inside or whatever, or when it's brought inside and outside, closing the doors in a timely fashion, but mainly just using little common sense in how you work things is what we're hoping for that other energy savings policies.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Londo or Mr. Blatt?
I would just point out, it's good to see that there's going to be energy audits as part of the energy policies. It's going to be extremely important. I know that's been talked about at the Finance Committee, et cetera. We're long overdue to do that. This building alone, as you said, it's a huge heat suck and needs a lot of work to get that back under control to some degree. The vehicle idling, of course, when we renovated DPW and expanded the storage space over there, we probably saved a lot of energy with that, but I guess that's out the window for this measure. But good to see these implementations coming. So.
Right. And like I said, we still feel there's other things we can do in town. We're just looking for we're looking for the initial funds to start, and to start being able to show the savings to the townsfolk and to everybody else, so that we can move forward on this more than anything else.
If we eliminate vehicles, the non-exempt vehicles, does that help?
If we eliminate the non-exempt vehicles?
Yeah. You said there's 4. What are the 4?
John, John?
Yeah, we have a light pickup truck at the school department. We have a sedan at the school department. We have an administrative vehicle at the fire department.
Right.
And
Did you have?
There's one.
we had a well,
The
yeah, we had a
fire-
second sedan.
Chief's vehicle.
No, the fire chief's vehicle, we classified as a command vehicle. So,
But at the, yeah, so that was not one of the four that was, the other one was the second sedan at the school department.
Okay, great.
So yeah, those, if we eliminated vehicles, if we eliminated vehicles and we eliminated the energy use, then it's just a
It's a
reduction.
win. Okay, good.
yeah, so yeah, we had, the fire had a Crown Vic, and then the school has 3 vehicles. It has 2 sedans and a pickup.
Okay.
And part of that discussion goes to the big carbon footprint, is that if we get rid of a vehicle, does that mean our employees use their vehicle and we have the same mileage for the environment as opposed to a municipal vehicle? Because I don't believe you can count employees' vehicles towards your energy savings. So,
Or if you use other vehicles that are sitting parked otherwise.
right. So, I mean, certainly as we look to possibly replacing those vehicles, if you replace an energy, electric vehicles, because a lot of those vehicles don't travel very far, and therefore maybe that will be saving some other things too.
Sure.
I would commend you and the committee for this report. I think that the detail by building is going to create a mentality. I mean, I'm certainly growing up reminding my father, always saying, turn off the lights. Well, I mean, that's part of the thing, is that when do you leave the building? And at the Ritter Building, when you're in one room, the lights are in 3/4 of the other rooms because it's one light based on when it was a library.
Right.
So changing those in your plan makes sense to, just thinking about how we do things differently.
Right. And as you mentioned, the Ritter Building, even just bringing the lights down to more the level where folks are could be a huge savings. You can possibly have lights off because now you have you're having more task lighting versus general lighting.
And the only other thing I would say, because it took me a little while to realize that changing from oil to gas, you're still going to have to heat the building to a certain temperature, but theoretically the furnace is going to be more efficient with that gas as opposed to the oil furnace that's available.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Plus, you might not have the long-term problems of an oil tank and storage of an oil tank. There's, as we all know, there could be issues with oil tanks over time.
Well, if there are no more questions, I would entertain a motion on accepting this plan from the Communities Task Force, Green Communities Task Force.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to your committee again,
Yeah.
and keep us posted after you submit it, what the state says.
Believe us, we will. So thank you.
Okay, next, review the existing debt service and estimates for the school building project.
We should go to the town.
Yeah, let's,
They're both here for the same.
oh, they're both
They're
here
both
together?
here for the same thing.
Oh, for both of these?
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
You want to take? You want to take the other one?
No, I just thought, because they were here, they're waiting, but
All right.
if they're waiting for both.
They are waiting for
Okay.
both. So before we get into the school building project, I wanted to take the opportunity to let the board know that last week we received some good news relative to one of our bond ratings. The town actually carries 2 bond ratings from 2 different agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's. And most recently, we had our Moody's bond rating given a nice, I'm not sure what to call it. We had a nice, I'm at a loss for words. What we did on an annual basis, or we're supposed to, on an annual basis, have each of the rating agencies look at our financial statements to make sure that we are still demonstrating the ability to carry the rating that we carry. So we have an underlying rating with each of these agencies, but then they also use an outlook rating, either positive, negative, or stable, to kind of give the investing public an idea of what's going on. Because bond ratings, while they're similar to your own personal credit rating, they are different in the fact that with your own personal credit rating, you can do things on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that impact your credit rating, and you see changes to your credit rating even on a monthly or less basis. But with an institutional rating, you don't see those changes because they're looking at what you're doing on an annual basis. So you don't tend to see changes in the underlying rating, but what you do tend to see on an annual basis, or what you can see, is a change in that outlook rating. So what happened last week was that we were notified that the negative outlook that we were carrying on our Moody's rating had been eliminated. And that was very good news because we had been carrying that negative rating for a couple of years. It's been a couple of years since Moody's looked at us, so it may have been possible that if they looked at us last year, we could have had it removed last year. But this was the year that they decided to look at us, and we had that removed. So that is significant. It's a great time for us to have a solid rating with both of these rating agencies. I was asked almost immediately, okay, what does that mean? Now we're going to get a better interest rate. And of course, I thought of that myself. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to go through why I don't think, or why I don't necessarily think it would affect our interest rating, and why I don't necessarily think that we're going to move up to the next level. Back in 2009, our credit ratings were increased from both agencies. We had an A2 with Moody's and a single A with Standard & Poor's in 2009, and those ratings were increased based on a review of our financial performance and other items to a AA3 from Moody's and a AA minus from Standard & Poor's. And those ratings were equivalent in 2009 between the two agencies, and they both moved up, and they are equivalent now. But that was a significant improvement for us because we went from essentially an upper medium grade rating to a high grade rating. There are 4 ratings that are within that high grade rating category. With Moody's, a AA1, a AA2, a AA3 where we are, and a single A1. And then with Standard & Poor's, a AA plus, a AA minus, and an A plus. Those are all considered high grade. So when we go out on any particular bond issue, we are in that high grade category. So whether we are at the upper end of that higher grade or in the middle of that higher grade, there doesn't tend to be a difference in the interest rate that you receive for a particular bond issue. What you do see, you may see a fluctuation in interest rate based on what else you're competing with that day and the size of your issue. So if you have a very large issue, you're going to get a very good rating. The town's going to get a very good rating because we are a high grade bond that day. So while this rating is very good news, the change in this rating is very good news, it's not going to have a significant positive impact on the interest rate. When we go out to market for the high school project or for any bond issue, we are going to get a very competitive interest rate because of that credit rating. So I don't want to take away from that, but I also don't want people to think that we should have a higher rating or we necessarily need to do things to get a higher rating, because we have a very high rating, a very competitive rating for a community of our size, our demographics, what we can do. The question was asked, what can we do to move up to that next level? And all we can do is speculate on what we can do to move up to that next level. But what I was told by our financial advisor is we would need to be looking to have our financial reserves, his words were north of 10%. We talk about that 5 to 10% range. We struggle to stay at 5%. We're slightly above 5%. But he said more than 10% and probably in the 12 to 15% range. I don't think it makes sense for us to set that as a goal for this community, because I don't believe that it would have a significant impact on an interest rating that we would achieve. I think we need to be realistic about who we are, what is achievable, and I think that we're doing an excellent job with what we have, and we have a great credit rating, and I was very pleased that we had that negative outlook restored. Negative outlook removed, not restored.
And again, for us to get an improved rating in '09, as the economy was at its bottom, as we were dealing with the state aid disappearing and more burden locally, and for us to still improve based on the financial decisions we were making, the town manager was making, the community was making, at the advice of the FinCom and everyone here. And for it still to be improving, even as we face the challenges ahead of us, I think that speaks volumes. And I didn't bring the letter with me with the verbiage, but I know it addressed the fact that, yeah, we're looking ahead at a significant borrowing, at a significant project for the middle school, high school. So that's even taken into account, even knowing that we're going to market potentially soon for a significant borrowing, that our rating actually is, the negative is off it. So that tells you something. So we've made a lot of difficult decisions over the years. I'm sure many have been unpopular. I guess some probably popular with folks, but it's served a purpose, and it's just given us a good, solid baseline from which to move forward. So it's all good news. It's been a challenge, but.
So with that, then, what I would like to do is to walk through these two handouts with you. I did go through these with the Finance Committee at their last meeting. I think I'll just pull out a couple of things, and if you want to go into them in more depth, we certainly can. But I was asked to work with our financial advisor to come up with some funding scenarios for this middle school, high school project, assuming that the local share of the project would be somewhere around $37 million. So that's what we did. We did look at both 20-year and 30-year scenarios, and we also looked both at level payment scenarios and level principal scenarios. And the level principal scenarios really are shown for illustration only. It's typical for public infrastructure projects, or we're required for all public infrastructure projects except for school projects to finance on a level principal model, which means that the payments are highest in the beginning where the principal is highest, so you're paying both a share of the principal and the interest on the full project, and they are reduced over time as the principal is paid off. There is special legislation in the state that allows school projects to be financed as level payment, level debt service projects, so that there is predictability in what the cost will be for the taxpayer. The level payments are very similar to a mortgage, so you end up paying more in interest because you're reducing your principal at a lower rate. I think I will go to probably page 7 first. As I mentioned, we looked both at 20-year and 30-year. So if we start with the impact on a 30-year project, and again, we're looking at an estimated local share of $37 million. The projected impact for a project of that magnitude for a home of average assessed valuation, and the average assessed valuation in town is about $248,000. So for a 30-year term, we would be looking at about $530 annually for that project. On page 12, I did the same thing for a 20-year term. So on a 20-year term, the impact for a home, an average assessed valuation home, is about $625. Now, the reason I looked at a 20-year also is because the increased cost that the town would pay in terms of interest for that additional 10 years to go from 20 to 30 years is significant, and that is shown on page 4. Both if you look at page 4 and page 10. On page 4, the interest costs associated with a 30-year term are about $25.7 million, and with a 20-year term, $18.1 million. So a significant difference in the amount of interest that would be paid to carry the project those additional 10 years, significant enough that I think it warrants some discussion. I believe I've mentioned to you before, by state law, the actual financing of the project is left to the Board of Selectmen and the town treasurer. So this board, over the next several months, needs to become very familiar with the impacts of the project so that you can make the best decision for the community in terms of how to finance the project. Obviously, you don't have to decide how the project is financed until it's time to do the permanent financing. But I know that you are interested in talking about that and coming to some consensus well before that, because that is going to be a key piece of information for people making a decision about whether or not to support the project. I have been asked to put together some additional scenarios, which I think I'll just reference, because as you know, we have some non-excluded debt that is falling off of our debt service schedule around 2017, 2018. It's very small, but then we have a significant portion of our exempt debt falling off around 2024, 2025. So I have been asked, both by members of this board and the Finance Committee, to look at some scenarios that would allow some temporary financing to get us, if possible, to one of those two junctures to potentially lessen the burden of this project to the taxpayer. And I can tell you, just in general terms, and we can talk about them specifically, that while we have some flexibility to do some short-term financing for this project that would carry us out several years, under state law, after the clock starts ticking on the financing from the first time we do any borrowing related to this project. So we already have an authorization for $750,000 for the feasibility schematic design portion of the project. We do need to do a borrowing before the end of the fiscal year to cover the town's share of that. So the clock is going to start ticking on this project at whatever point this fiscal year that we do that borrowing. We have the opportunity to go 2 years out and just pay interest costs associated with that short-term borrowing. But once we go past the 2 years, we have to start making principal pay down payments, even if we continue to just do the short-term financing of the project. But in essence, what happens when you're required to make that principal pay down payment, you're essentially making a payment on interest and you're making a payment on principal. So while you don't have the benefit of having the project permanently financed, the level of payment that you're making between principal and interest is essentially the same. So based on what I have looked at, I'm not seeing a way through short-term financing that will significantly lessen the burden of this project. I think realistically, we are looking at, if we're going to borrow over 20 years, that we're looking at an average impact of about 625. Let me just make sure. 625. And if we are looking over 30 years, about $530. So I just don't see that there's anything that we can do that's going to significantly change those impacts. We're looking in that general area based on either a 20 or 30 year.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
I got to Carrie a little late in this process after she'd done a lot of this work. One of the things that I'd be interested in looking at would be if we borrowed at 30 years for 10 years, and at that point convert to a 10-year loan, which would still get us at a 20-year period, but the first 10 years would be when it's layered on the existing exempt debt, and the second would take the place of some of that. And I don't know if that's going to change. We're looking at on the average house, we're talking about $95 a year difference, of whether that would change that number. That is 18% difference between those two numbers. So whatever we come up with, I mean, I like the idea of a shorter term and shorter interest, but I also know that every time I've bought a house, I've gone for a 30-year mortgage, looking at the total amount. Now, I haven't owned the house for 30 years yet. I also believe that the borrowing should be somewhat close to the life of the building. Well, we're looking at a 50-year lifespan of most of our buildings, and I wouldn't be looking at that point. And then also the concept of having the cost of the project be over the users of the building for a longer period of time. So that's some of the philosophy I come into looking at this borrowing part. I'm very aware that the added, we're looking at an extra $10 million worth of interest between the 20-year and the 30-year. That's a lot of money. At the same time, I'm also aware that that $95 difference can make a difference for the people that are involved. And if you get to the higher level taxes for residential or commercial, you're going to be raising the taxes there as well. I am in full support of the school project. And everything that I've seen during the presentation of the school projects, I remain support of that. And the only way we're going to support it, I know I talked about this during the campaign for selectmen, that the only way that this town can pay for it would be an exempt debt. So I know that I will be supporting an exempt debt, and I would like to try to get the best thing that makes the most sense financially.
Anybody else? I would agree that we have to look at all the avenues and present different pictures. The picture, the illustration that you just suggested, borrowing for 30 years and then in 10 years reborrowing, of course the big question mark in there is what our interest rate's going to be in 10 years from now. So that puts, it may give short-term satisfaction, and it could be a high price. I mean, maybe it isn't, but it's really a big unknown. I think we need to hear, as we get closer and we have these two scenarios before we make a decision of what goes on the ballot, I think we need to hear from the public. I mean, which one they believe for their own situations makes more sense to them. I mean, do you spend, again, just using the average house scenario, do you pay $90 less a year and wind up paying $10 million more in interest as the town or not. Again, it's a trade-off. So,
And the other question becomes how long somebody expects to live in town. I mean, everybody in this town is going to make their own decision based on when they're going to retire. Are they going to retire here? Are they going to, people moving here to have kids into the school system, that type of thing. So I think that's great that we would seek public comment.
We definitely have to. And we talk about if you're going to have kids in school or not. I mean, it's like, well, who paid for my kids went through these schools, and these schools were all here when I got here, so I haven't paid for any of them, so I figure I'll pay for them going forward. Someone else paid for them. Thank you. Paying for the primary school, and my kids missed that one. It's part of the deal. I guess my other question with our financial analyst or advisor, as we talk about going out 30 years versus 20, I mean, what's the impact of, the value of money? If we're paying $520 a month or $530 a month, 20 years from now, I mean, what's that going to be worth? Is there a projection we can put on that to kind of take some of that, if we want to go longer term? Could it possibly make sense financially? When I look at it, my initial instinct is no. I mean, my wife and I bought our first house, we went for 30 years, and then we refinanced, we went for 15, and we took the pain because we wanted to get out from under that debt, and we didn't want to pay that extra hundreds of thousands in interest. It was a hard decision, but it's very important. But I understand in this day and age of, 84-month car loans, et cetera, people tend to look at things differently, so.
I think it's critical we get public involvement. If you look at it from a long-term perspective, absolutely going for the shorter amount of time makes sense from a town to save that $10 million. But we also have to understand that a lot of our citizens live on a fixed income or have only so much money coming in. And the reality is it could make a difference whether or not they vote to support the project based on that small amount of money. Because it may seem like a small amount of money, but to some individuals and to some families, it's going to be a deal breaker. So I think it's critical that we get that public input and we get it as part of our decision-making process. I know that, and I guess my question is, how do we do that? Because I know that the school has the school building project forum scheduled for next Wednesday. At what point do we solicit input from the people on how we finance this project?
I think we just did.
Okay, so are we going to look for emails, or are we going to look for, how are we going to?
Anybody out there who's listening, I mean, any way you want to communicate with us. If you want to drop off a letter to the Board of Selectmen at Town Hall, if that's your easiest avenue, do that. If it's an email to the Board of Selectmen or the town manager wanting to voice your opinion, do it that way. All our emails are on the website. However you want to communicate with us. If you want to come in person, which is always good to hear people's stories and people's opinions here live, I think that's important. So any way that you can communicate with us. The real issue is just communicate with us, because that's what we will weigh that as a board in which direction we decide to go when this becomes a necessity to make a final decision.
I guess I would offer a suggestion, and I don't know whether it's possible, but, if we can put these spreadsheets out on the website, and I know the planning board just took advantage of SurveyMonkey, and whether or not we can just do a one question, it's very simple. I mean, I've used it for other tasks that I've done professionally. It's a very easy service. If we can put just one simple question there up on the website using SurveyMonkey, which one do you support? Give all the data, put all the data out there, and just that one question, because it will tabulate our results and give us it's an easy vehicle for people to respond. So if we could set something up like that, I think it's going to be important for us in making this decision.
Can we do that?
Yes.
And I would ask if they could do the quick analysis of the third option, which was the 10 and the 30-year for down to a 10. If it doesn't look like it's going to change numbers, or I guess I'd just be interested in, and you have to come up with some guesstimate of what the interest rate's going to be in 10 years. I'd just be interested in seeing what the difference would be on the average house if we just stay with that number all the way through.
If you could bring the question that you're going to post on SurveyMonkey to us before it appears, I just want to make sure that it's all predicated, that these are hypothetical numbers. It has not been determined, but these are, in the range that we're looking at.
Right.
Just so people don't say if things change that, wait, I thought we were asked on this.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Toll.
I think that it's our responsibility, and even legally our responsibility along with the town treasurer, to make a fiduciary decision for the town. A decision on things like this is a very personal decision, and it has to do with a lot of different things. I think when you make a decision, when you make the analogy of a home mortgage, I think we all have made decisions based on a shorter term, a longer term, how long I'm staying, is it my first home, my second home, all those types of things. I think I agree totally with what was said, that it's important for us to give our community an opportunity to voice their opinions and for us to weigh those opinions. But it's also important, I believe, to look at taking risk out of it as much as we can. I agree with the sentiment that, nobody knows what interest rates will look like 10 years from now. I think if you are on a fixed income or not, you plan best if you have a kind of a fixed idea of what an expense looks like. I think it's important, though, that the town people will decide whether they want to make a significant expenditure. And, those decisions may or may not be impacted by whether people have people in school or not, and I hope they're not impacted by that as a sole decision. I think it's part of an obligation to, when you live in a town, to understand your tax burden for all the different things that it pays for. But it's our responsibility to kind of suggest, as we're asking for input, what perhaps the most fiscally responsible fiduciary path might be, or the two, as opposed to kind of many.
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Bertram.
I just want to say I agree it is our fiduciary responsibility, but it also is going to determine the biggest question we're going to be faced with, and the biggest question people are going to grapple with when they decide whether or not to support this project, is whether or not they're going to be able to afford it. So while we might think it makes sense to do a 20-year term, if that's going to make or break the project, then we've got to look at that. And I think that's why soliciting that public input is going to be critical. And I think we might all have different perspectives, even on this board. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the townspeople whether or not they want to move this project forward. But I know that the biggest question we're going to face is, what is it going to cost me on an annual basis? And we need to have that answer.
And I would also add that I agree with what you said. I think what you said is absolutely true. I think that soliciting input from the taxpayers is one part of us weighing the decision. Mm-hmm. And the proportion that the answers come in to however many people reply or communicate with us will also be critical, because I think what Mrs. Bertram said is correct. I think that I believe all the, I don't want to speak for people, and so correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this board is unanimously in favor of the project and the need for it. So if there is that critical point where one is going to be more apt to have it pass, then I think that is a very big determining factor, although not the sole determining factor. So I appreciate that. Anybody else? I want to again thank the town manager for putting together very good illustrations of possibilities, and with again visuals as well as spreadsheets to illustrate them. So thank you. All right, we're going to review the first quarter revenue and expense reports with our town accountant and the treasurer collector.
I think I'm going to go through my report, and if they have other comments, they will make them as well. So we have had the opportunity to take a look at the first quarter results for the current fiscal year, and actually things are looking rather well this fiscal year, and better than what we typically see in the first quarter of any fiscal year. In terms of revenue, at the end of the first quarter, we had collected pretty close to 25% of our budgeted revenues. That is skewed somewhat by the fact that we receive our MSBA reimbursement. We received all of that in the first quarter. So if you were to back out that and assume only 25% of those revenues, our total collected revenues would be at about 23.25%. So we are doing really well in terms of revenues for the first quarter. One of the reasons that our first quarter revenues are typically lower than 25% of budgeted revenues is because our excise tax, which is a big local receipt, comes in, the bulk of that comes in the third and fourth quarter of the fiscal year. And sometimes we do see that real estate tax collections grow stronger as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. You do see that sometimes. One item that I wanted to point out was our meals tax, which is running at 30.64% of budget. It's insignificant in terms of the total budget, but I think it's a nice local indication of what our economy is doing. We have had that for a number of years and have collected about the same every year. We haven't typically seen a whole lot of growth there, and we are starting to see some growth in that collection. So I thought that was important to note. Other than that, there really wasn't anything remarkable in revenues. Some things that we have to look forward to coming up potentially in the second quarter. Building permit issuances for the solar projects, which will probably be $100,000+ for the two projects together, so that will be greatly appreciated. I did also want to mention that I am starting to see some data out of the assessor's office on our new growth. The assessor's office is compiling all of that data to send into the state to have new growth certified. We had an estimate of $250,000 in new growth, and based on what I have from the assessor, we have $262,278, and they're still doing some additional work on personal property, and estimate probably an additional $25,000. So we're looking at probably about $285,000 in new growth, and we had budgeted $250,000. So that will be the first time in a couple of years that we've actually made the target. We've come in just under for the last couple of years, so that is significant. Were there any questions on revenues before I move to expenditures? In terms of expenditures through the first quarter, we've expended 37.5% of our budget, which is pretty typical. Again, we're only 25% through the year, but we have a number of expenditures that we pay in full up front. And our expenditures, the way they're reported, they're both actual expenditures and encumbrances, make up that 37.5%. But in terms of payments that we make in full upfront, one comes to mind in particular, our Worcester Regional Retirement Assessment. We pay 100% of that on July 1st, and we receive a discount for doing so. So that's one reason why we see that our expenditures are running a little bit higher. But also we encumber a number of parts of the budget for utilities and some service contracts and that sort of thing. So that is included in that 37.5%. In terms of some items that we are paying particular attention to, our legal expenses, and I provided you a detail on legal expenses. Through the first 2 months, and we only have 2 months because when we ran the reports as of September 30th, we hadn't yet been billed for September for legal services, but we've spent close to $25,000 of our $125,000 appropriation for the year through those 2 months. So that is of concern. and legal expenses always are. We either seem to have a decent amount left over, or we're over. So we will need to be potentially making a transfer there at some point. Injury leave for our police and fire injury. I am anticipating at the end of the fiscal year that we will have an overage of about $20,000, and this is attributable to one officer that we have out on injured on duty long-term, who has since applied for and been approved for disability retirement. So we do expect sometime in November that officer will transition from injured on duty status to retired status, but I do expect that we will have an overage there. In terms of veterans benefits, we are also running over, and I have some additional information that I just received that I didn't have the opportunity to send out to you, but based on our current claims, we expect that we will probably expend about $47,000 this year, assuming everybody who is currently receiving benefits continues through the fiscal year. Veterans benefits, those we pay based on residents in town who are eligible for them. We do receive a reimbursement from the state for what we pay out at the rate of 75% of what we pay, but we receive that in the following fiscal year. So we do have to be able to pay that in the fiscal year it's incurred, and we receive the reimbursement in the following fiscal year. Another item that I mentioned, it's minor, but band concerts. We are over there, and if we want to continue with the same number of concerts, which I assume we need to, we just need to make a slight increase in the budget to account for band concerts. The last, actually I wanted a couple of other items. Health insurance. Our retiree plans, we renew our active employee plans on July 1st, and our retiree plans are now renewed on January 1st. As a result of the changes we made to our health insurance offerings that were approved by the Public Employee Committee. So all of our retiree plans now run on the calendar year to coincide with Medicare. So we did just receive our renewal rates for health insurance for our retiree plans, and we had a really excellent renewal for all three retiree plans. And I expect that we will, as a result, save about $50,000 this year, which is significant because going into this fiscal year, our enrollment was a little bit higher than what I projected. And if that had continued and we didn't have any relief with this new renewal, we really would have been at 100% of the budget. And that wouldn't be a comfortable place to go into the third and fourth quarter of the fiscal year. So I do, based on what I'm seeing right now, expect about a $50,000 surplus in health insurance. Unemployment, I did mention that we were doing a bit better than anticipated, and I received, after I wrote the memo, a copy of the latest claim. And we do have one claim that was approved, was actually approved in September, but we just received the billing. And the maximum benefit is $15,870, or the maximum liability that we have is $15,870. And we have a $15,000 budget for that. So depending on whether or not we have to pay that out, we may be looking at a slight deficit. But we have...
That is under what category?
Under unemployment.
Okay.
This is our first claim for the fiscal year, and that's not typical. Typically, we have a couple of claims running at a time. We had a good long 6+ month period where we had no claims, and now we have this one. In terms of our workers' comp and general liability insurances, we do have slight surpluses in both of those categories, and those insurances we do pay the 100% of the premium on the first of the year. So I don't expect to see any changes there. Oh, and that, I think that's the end of my comments on the quarterly report.
Any questions for the town manager on this?
Mr. Chairman, I was at the library trustees meeting, and they were looking at their report, and the encumbrance part is always something that you have to think about how it's in and out. And I know John Mayle on the Finance Committee was working with the Sewer Commission about what's the actual budget versus what's actually expended. My looking at this is that if something's encumbered, this system presumes that it's going to be spent, and therefore it has 100, like for library, there's one of the line items that because it's encumbered, it's 100% used or obligated. They're trying to use the budget for a management process. Is there another report that's there for budget versus actual without the encumbered? Because I think that if you take the encumbered part out, you're actually seeing what are we actually obligated to pay at that point.
I think that the town accountant probably could address that. One comment I would like to make is if you look at the reports, you can see or get a sense that different departments do things differently. We encumber when a purchase requisition is submitted, and typically the way that I would do that is if I have a contract, if I've entered into a contract or made a commitment to expend something, I would encumber those monies. Sometimes you see some of the smaller departments, and I think it's just a carryover from the way things used to be done. They'll encumber 100% of their supplies budget. And I don't know if there's a thought in the back of somebody's head that if I don't encumber it, it's going to be taken away. So that's why some things are skewed, because people will encumber mileage reimbursement instead of waiting until it occurs. Or even with utilities. You see some utility accounts are encumbered, but I would ask the town accountant if she could answer the question about a different type of report. They could always not encumber unless they actually have procured the service, too.
And I don't think there is a different report. I think that the thought process is that if those funds are encumbered, the monies will be expended. So to the best of my knowledge, in the accounting system that we have, that's the report that would be generated. I can check to find out for certain for you, but I don't think so, because I do think that the thought is within the accounting software that if the funds are encumbered, the intention is that they will be expended. So
as you expend it, is the encumbrance released?
Yes.
So, okay, so that's the training of the department that may not understand it, is that you want to look at the paid amount to see how does that compare to what you...
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Before you step down, Mr. Chair, just two questions. Can you describe, because I don't know the answer to this, the staffing in your office? And my understanding is that you're rolling out the Munis system to the departments, and I'm assuming that's a good thing, so that there's less work for you?
Well, right now, the staffing in my office is myself, full-time. I have a clerical person who works 24 hours a week, whose primary function is the accounts payable warrants that you see. She is currently in the process now of, we are looking to roll out the actual requisition entry portion of the Munis module to all the departments so that they have the ability to enter their pay requisitions in, and they'll go through the Munis system electronically for approval rather than passing papers all over the place. And between myself and Peggy, who works in my office, we're in the process of training and setting up the proper securities in the software and everything so that we have the ability to do that. As far as freeing up time in my office, it's really not going to, because we weren't the ones who did that in the first place. It was all done in the Selectmen's office, so I think the thought process is that it's going to free up some time in the Selectmen's office so that the person who is in the selectman's office can do the functions that she was originally hired to do and not purchase orders.
And if I just might add to that, the selectman's office didn't used to do it.
Right. It was through layoffs
Back
that...
in fiscal 11, we had a full-time person that half-time did purchase orders, purchase requisitions, and then the other half did benefits, and that person was laid off. And at that point, the requisitions were brought up to the selectman's office and really became a good 60% of your secretarial person's function. And so we've been trying to get to the point where we can do this electronically because it is much smoother. I mean, we have a handful of departments that are entering their own purchase requisitions in the process. I mean, what would take even a couple of days by the time paper traveled is taking, a matter of an hour.
Yeah, the people who are using the system now are really happy with it. I mean, it works wonderfully. We have a few glitches we have to work out, but once everybody's up and running, it'll be great. And everybody will be able to also go in and look at their budgets and run their own year-to-date budget reports and check the status on a PO. And so all the way around, it'll be better for everybody once it's up and running. And
Mrs. Bertram.
As a member of the Computer Advisory Committee probably 15 or 18 years ago, I don't even know how long ago it was, when we were dealing with Munis, one of the objectives was to obtain the ability for individuals to go even beyond the purchase order requisition, but to do some of their payables online.
we have that now.
And so are some of the departments doing that online now?
We do. There is... the department who is doing it well, actually, I shouldn't say the department, because the school department and the DPW both have remote access, and they are entering their own accounts payable. So the batches are coming up entered, and the only thing that has to be done in my department is that we have to go through and just verify that everything that we have is entered into the computer correctly and that it's a proper expense.
Now, are there plans to deploy that to other departments as well? I mean, when we're talking about trying to save personnel time and trying to offload some of the workload, it seems to me to make sense to allow remote access to more departments, such as the library, such as the Ritter Building, all the land use departments. It would save a lot of personnel time, because
and
rather
I think I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think it's something that can be done at the same time that this requisition decentralization is happening.
Okay, because I know, when I used to work here, and that was many years ago now, but, everybody, and I think it's still happening, is everyone's keeping track of their own payables electronically and within their own system, whatever it is. They're doing a paper copy, and then it's being manually entered up here. If we can eliminate that whole process, it makes sense for everyone.
Yep, and that's definitely something that we're looking to do. And I have to say, we've actually made progress over the last 15 years, finally.
Anybody else have any questions for Ms. Brochu?
The audit will be coming back to us once that's completed, and we'll have another discussion at that point, I think.
They're actually coming in to do the actual audit work the first week in November. They'll be here for about a week and a half, and then we should have drafts available, I would think, within a couple weeks after that, and hopefully a final audit sometime in January, I would think.
Do we sign off on that, or does the town manager sign off on that?
What we have what we've done with the audit is we've switched off with the finance committee. There's no official document that's signed or anything. But we'll have the auditor make a presentation to the board one year, to the finance committee the next year. It is the board's turn this year. So we will have the auditor come in, hopefully before you start review of the fiscal 15 budget. But again, probably sometime in January to come in and make that presentation.
Not that I'm expecting any issues. It'd be interesting to see what they have for recommendations for the town.
Thanks for a great presentation, though. Yeah. I can tell you, I haven't sat through them. Yeah. Excellent. Especially the opening number is really great.
We just finished our audit at work today, so that's why. Yes.
The treasurer collector is also in attendance tonight. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
The only
For-
question was what the next time we'll have a status report on the tax title?
You were much too comfortable.
The only report that I have tonight is that I did receive information from Capola and Capola that the 6 properties that I had selected for the land court have been filed with the land court. So I don't know really what the next step is. He'll be in contact with me if I need to supply any more information. I can tell you, yesterday I mailed 75 letters out for people that still owe money on 2013 taxes. Prior to me sending out the letter for advertising to try to cut down the number of people that I have to advertise to, hopefully save on some of my expense. And I'm already receiving phone calls today. What can I do to not, have this go forward to get a title on my property? So I'm diligently trying to get those receivables paid. And if I had more money in my budget, I could, file some more of those old tax titles, but I only could do 6 because that's all I can spend.
You'll be able to make that pitch in a couple months.
Okay, I'll try.
And I just want to chime in on that pitch. I think it's important that we do look at that budget, because as we go forward with this project, having people up to date on their taxes, and it's money that the town is losing yearly. So it's money that we might have to come up with up front within the budget, but it's going to pay off in the long run, so.
Agreed. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, town manager goals and board of selectmen goals are going to get pushed to the November 5th meeting. Minutes.
I do have the minutes. I had 2 members asked for or submitted some minor revisions. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, so those changes aren't reflected in.
So these are the new ones on top here that need to be,
Those are the new ones for the
Last-
8th. There was a...
that's what I'm saying, so you need this
Yes,
one signed.
I do need that one
Okay.
signed. And the only change to the 8th is one of the members was incorrectly identified as the vice chair or something like that.
It was a coup.
As the defendant.
It was
They were-
a
they were-
coup.
they were named as the defendant. Totally inappropriate.
Vice chair, defendant, it's a toss.
Warrants.
Tough crowd.
Accounts payable in the amount of $458,403.23.
Oh, you'll love this. You weren't there. Don't sign them. And I just, the 10, 15 minutes that are in here, these are the ones that have not yet been corrected,
Correct.
correct?
Correct, they
Okay.
have not been
So,
Okay.
Okay, what is this, payroll?
Yes.
Payroll. I'm almost embarrassed to say it, in the amount of 1 cent.
Wow.
I want to
Costs
kick, I
more
want to
for the
kick this
paper,
back.
I
I want to
think.
kick this, yeah, exactly.
That's
Payroll in the amount of $629,684.40, which I'm assuming should have been 41 cents. And therefore the other payments. And a payroll deductions warrant in the amount of
When you have it.
$258,536.74. Do we want to take that up? Yeah. We have signatures, with the proper contract that I announced last week, the renewal of the contract with the town manager. At that meeting, the paperwork was incorrect, and now it is corrected. Action file issues. Anybody have any action file issues? Mr. Matthews?
Just wanted to mention, I understand from the town manager, there's been some griping, sniping notations on the low cost we had sold Jones House for a few years ago or last year. And I just wanted to point out that people ought to go take a look at Jones House and take a look at the condition Jones House is currently in as compared to when it was still owned by the town. And thank the Marshall family who bought that property. They're bringing it back to life, investing, I'm not sure how many hundreds of thousands of dollars into it that the town is not, to make that a viable property back in the tax rolls. Again, when we sold that property, we were finally able to do that with the help of the Historical Commission, and we went out to bid at a higher rate. We got no bids because of the condition of the house and because of the limited historical restrictions on the exterior of the house. We put it back out to bid. We got the money that we got, which wasn't a lot, but again, considering the condition of that house, after 30 years of abuse and neglect, we were lucky to get what we got. And in a few more years, when they're done with that house, it's going to be returned to the glory it used to have, and it's going to no longer be an eyesore and an embarrassment to the town, and it's going to be an asset for our center of town. So just wanted to point that out, because Jones House, to me, was one of the things that got me involved in this town government, because 10 years ago, I saw that house, and I said, what the hell are we doing with this thing? How are we so poorly managing this property? And at that time, members of the Board of Selectmen I talked about it said, it's too far gone. It can't be saved. It's not worth looking at. Ignore it, let it go. So it took a few years, but finally, with everyone's help and involvement, it's actually going to be, it's on its way back to being an asset. So just wanted to point that out.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Mr. Matthews, because I would like to see, there were certain covenants that were in the contract, and if we can just get a status. I know, I see the job they're doing, and I recognize the job they're doing, so it is by no means critical. I just think that if we're going to make those covenants in a contract, it's really imperative that we check where they are. But to add what Mr. Matthews said, not only are we getting an eyesore taken care of and back on the tax rolls, but what was important to me at the time as well, and certainly to the Historical Commission, that we saved a very important historic home in town. I mean, somebody who's nationally and internationally recognized as a world-class botanist who had lots of contributions to the world of horticulture and agriculture. So for that alone, it was worth the low price and the care that the Marshalls are putting into it. So for all across the whole spectrum, I think it was a win for everybody.
I guess we should refer to it as the Luther Burbank House, for clarity.
Yeah, I don't know how it ever got to be the Jones House. It really should
yeah.
be the Luther Burbank House. Maybe we should put a petition to call it that from now on.
Well, he didn't live here very long, so that maybe the Jones lived there the longest.
Yeah, but nobody knows who the Joneses are, except you're supposed to keep up with them.
The other thing, I'm sure this is part of the new growth on the taxes too, so I would be interested to see what the new valuation would be compared to what we've sold it for, and that would show what we've actually brought back for income.
Sure. And by the way, one of the things that happened is that there was a right of way that was negotiated with them with the Boys and Girls Club building, and as I sit on that board, I can tell you that they have taken the finest care, that there has never been any impedance with the working of that property at all. So they've done a great job with that too.
Mr. Chairman, under action file, I know I've mentioned this a couple times at meetings, the status of the agreement with RCAP and John Jewell and Associates. If we were awaiting, I think, some additional information from them as what they were looking for concessions, and if we can just schedule something as a follow-up in the near future.
Well, we're not ready to yet. I do have the assessor's office working with them on a couple of items, and they are also, the developer is also still putting together some information. But as soon as that is ready, it will be brought to you.
Okay. When is the next round of applications for the funding? Do you know what timeline they were looking at?
It hasn't been announced yet, last I heard. I do remember them talking about anticipating something in the fall, but there hasn't been anything announced yet. And they may be looking at something even a little bit different, or a combination of funding sources. So we're not holding them up, is I guess the bottom line.
Any other action file issues? Committee reports, Board of Health.
No report.
Building Reuse Committee.
We met last evening, we continue to make good progress, and we're actually beginning to narrow some of the variables down, so feeling pretty good about being able to meet our timeline.
Excellent. Capital Planning Committee.
No meeting this week. Next meeting is on the 30th of November.
November?
Can't be right.
October.
November 3rd.
No, November 3rd is a weekend, isn't it?
Okay. I don't know when the next meeting is.
November 3rd, I think, is a Sunday.
October 30th.
October 30th.
Right.
Okay, 30.
Sorry.
Gotcha. Finance Committee.
No report since the last meeting.
Library Board of Trustees.
I'd like to read a letter from the library to the Board of Selectmen. The trustees of the Lunenburg Public Library would like to thank you for your active support for the town's Lunenburg Public Library. We appreciate your understanding and importance of physically maintaining the library's exterior, thus ensuring Lunenburg's investment for the foreseeable future. The local company hired by the town did a fabulous maintenance and repair job. Martha and the trustees have received numerous positive comments about the painting, especially as it came under budget, saving the town money. A town's public library is the intellectual heart of a community, providing innumerable benefits to its townspeople and the surrounding communities. The library's director, staff, and trustees are dedicated to providing outstanding service and support to Lunenburg. That's the Board of Trustees. They also said thank yous to the DPW for the bidding process with John Londa and all the other people that were involved in the project.
Excellent.
No other report from the library.
MPO.
No report.
Planning Board.
No report.
PAC.
Just report out the meeting that this board had with the PAC last week in the workshop format. Started the process for improved communication between this board and that PAC. They have not yet scheduled their next meeting.
Okay. School Committee.
I missed their last meeting, no report.
School Building Committee.
We're going to meet tomorrow night at TC Passios, preparing basically for the forums the following week, which are on the 30th.
Sewer Commission.
No report. Other than we have Carl coming in, Carrie, is that scheduled?
It probably will be that first meeting in November, but it's not.
There was a slight hiccup with where Fitchburg was approving
Yes,
it
so
between
it's-
commissions and boards and everything.
Assuming they met their timetable, we will be ready next, at your first meeting in November.
Okay, and no report from Mass Broadband. Town Manager report?
No.
And lastly, we have 2 resignations. So we have a resignation of Rob Taylor, who is a reserve police officer, whose obligations in other areas prevent him from going further in his obligations to being a reserve officer. So I would like to, through the chief, I would like to thank him for his service to the town. And also we got a resignation from Robert Rand from the Personnel Committee. He's been with the town in the Personnel Committee for the last 5 years, since 2008. He says he's enjoyed making a contribution, wish it could have been greater. During the same period, family demands on my time have steadily increased, and I must decline any reappointment. I thank you for the opportunity to participate in our town government. And as a side note, he said the committee has been chronically short one member over the past couple of years. It has been without an employee representative since last June. I'd be willing to serve another year in the interest of ensuring that there is a quorum at meetings. However, in September, when the committee holds its annual elections of officers, I would decline any nomination for office. It is my hope that you can find volunteers to fill the open positions, but failing that, I'm willing to consider a membership for 1 year to fill the void. Again, I think he's put a lot of time and effort into revising the salary admin plan, making a lot of good proposals, working with his committee, working with the town manager in keeping that salary admin plan updated. So I want to commend him and thank him for his work. We should send a letter to him for his work on this. And please put this on the list of vacancies that I will announce as I did tonight. If we can have a list of those as we try yet again to whoever staying with us here at 9:40. there are vacancies for very important committees in town, and I would urge people, if you have skill sets in one of the vacancies, again, this is Personnel Committee. I know the Green Communities Task Force has vacancies. We heard from them earlier this evening. And of course, PAC has vacancies. We need people to volunteer for these important committees to keep the business of the town going.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to go back to Mr. Rand's resignation. I think you had read from his resignation in 2012, and he did stay for that additional year.
Did I say?
But,
Okay, that
yeah,
was-
but there was another, he's not willing to do another year this time. So he did that already. He did that already.
I
so.
apologize.
He already did his time.
He already did his extra
time he
year,
tried
so
to do
I just want to point out, we have
time.
a vacancy effective September.
It was one of those email printouts of a continuous email string, and I read the wrong portion, so I apologize.
So we currently have a vacancy. His resignation was effective 9/16/2013, and he did stay on an additional 16 months, and so we thank him for that, but we really need to fill those vacancies.
Okay. Any final public comment from the board? Any final public comment from the public? Mr. Blatt?
Real quick, you just talked about the size of committees and the problems. We're having a problem, the Green Community, with the original way it was outlaid with getting a quorum. We're down to 3-4 members. So it's presented to you folks about the idea of making the committee just a committee of 3 with 1 or 2 alternates on that, the ability of 1 or 2 alternates. Like I say, we're lucky when we get 2 to 3 of us to be able to make it on any given evening. Time constraints have been tough for everybody.
Yeah, we have taken that under advisement, and
Okay.
we are.
All right, so just so you understand, my town, I don't think our last 2 meeting minutes have been not been approved by the town clerk for that reason,
Yeah.
so.
It's my hope that we can get people involved before we go through the effort of,
Yes,
reducing the number, so.
agree.
I do just want to caution you about meeting without a quorum. This is an issue some of the other committees are having. What we did check with town council, and there was a thought that a quorum was the amount, a majority of the people that have been appointed, and we don't consider vacancies. We've been advised that that's not correct. It's a quorum of the total membership.
Right.
So it's just important that.
So then I'd like to inform you that we cannot have a quorum. I don't have enough members anymore to actually fill the original meeting. The original meeting was 7, and we don't have 7 active members. We don't have 4 active members right now, and that's one of the issues we have.
So you have 4 active members right now?
We have 3 with 1 that makes it when they can. I mean, myself included, the travel schedule right now, I'm lucky I'm in town for 1 week a month, and that's why I'm here tonight, is I postponed a trip, a business trip, just so I can be here. But the fact of the matter is we're having trouble with folks with their demands of work and everything else. And we're down to 4 members that actually are still consider themselves members, but only 3 that could usually make it to a meeting at most, if not 2.
The Green Communities Task Force was created by this board solely, not by bylaw, correct?
That's
by this
correct.
board.
All right, so we have the ability
So we
to
have
at
the
any
aba-
point.
We may want to take action sooner than later, and we can always
Well, we're not
revisit
having
it.
a meeting until November, so if somebody is, again, out there and wants to serve on the Green Communities Task Force and reducing energy and look at energy costs and how to make the town a greener environment, please see Town Hall, fill out a talent bank form, contact Mr. Blatt, who's the chair of the Green Task Force Committee, the Green Communities Task Force.
I have trouble with that one too, so.
And therefore, if we get enough people, then we won't have to reduce it. I'd prefer not to, but we will have to, just to let them do their business, so.
Right, and so I would like to put this on the agenda for a meeting in November. And if we don't have to take action, fantastic, but if we do, we should do it quickly so that you do have a legal quorum.
Thank you very
The
much.
5th or the 12th at the latest, so let's put it on the 5th and see what we have.
Because if you go to 5, you've got the 3-member
You have the
quorum.
3, right? My thought is to go to 5.
Okay, so like I said.
7's a big committee anyways.
Right.
It was, and as originally started, we were 7 with 2 alternates, and, that's dwindled substantially. The only other thing I have for that, and I thank you for that, the only other thing is I think, you folks should check, I think, the website, your names on the website. I think that you still show yourself as the chair. It's still showing like last year's method. on the
I'm more than happy to give it up.
Nope, I didn't see that letter, so, we read the letter wrong, but that's okay. I'm just, that was just.
Thank you. No, we
That wasn't the same time somebody was trying to become vice chair, too, so.
All right. Thank you, guys, for all your time and effort.
Thank you,
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Being there no further business, no executive sessions, our next, we have a workshop next Tuesday for policies and procedures.
And the one item that may come before us with the Dunkin' Donuts and Honey Farms.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll take that up, but we're not going to be televised, is the point.
Do we have a location on that yet?
Here.
Sewer normally
I don't
meets.
think so. I'll.
Okay.
As of right now, it's here.
They normally meet the last Tuesday of the month, televised.
Right. So we'll look.
Okay.
It'll be posted. We'll find out.
Somewhere.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Cartoons on the big screen, it's guaranteed fun for all. Support family entertainment with a gift of $35 and secure